I welcome you to the 2019 Holocaust Essay Contest Award Ceremony. This is a very unusual year for me because I have a raspy voice today. And so if it gets too bad, just let me know and I'll be quiet. But I do have a few things that I have to say. First of all, to thank, and this is for the record, thank the Federation for hosting us, and thank all of the parents for their students, thank the teachers for their students, thank the students for their participation, and to thank all the people who have supported this contest, which is a lot of people. The main financial money comes, a lot of it comes from the Sternlicht Holocaust Memorial Fund, which is administered by Federation right here. So we write a proposal every year, and we, so far, have been successful at getting funding. So we thank both Federation and Lisa Sternlicht. Her husband, Bino, who established this fund many years ago, has passed away some years ago. I thank the judging panel, which this year, I guess most of the judges are not here today. Peter Bent was told me he's not coming. Patricia Luria, she's not here. Sally, where are you? There you are. Okay. Sally Majid, thank you. Jessica Manny, there you are. Thank you. And Randy Simon told me he's traveling someplace. I won't even say where because that's classified information. And Bill Perlman, you're here. If my voice gets too bad, you're going to have to put up with Bill. But it's okay. I do it all the time. I thank the B'nai B'rith Gideon Lodge, which is one of the financial sponsors. And you can see that there are two tributes below. Rich Seiden of the Gideon Lodge died last year. He was supposed to come to this award ceremony, didn't show up, and then I found out that he died. But the fact that he was mortally ill didn't stop him from wanting to come here. So all I can say is that I can't believe how long it's been that I've been involved with this, and to see that two of our supporters have died makes me feel a little less bulletproof myself. Arthur Merriams died very recently, and I've worked with these people literally for decades. Arthur Merriams used to be involved with the refreshments, and that's something that some people might take for granted, even me. But this year, I had to help out with it, and that was quite involved. So I thank my wife, Eileen, for making sense of it all.
Lisa Sternlicht has just arrived.
Where's Lisa? Oh, you're here.
Sorry.
Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Okay, Lisa Sternlicht is here. And so our certificates now they're signed by the B'nai B'rith of Schenectady and of Albany, and Ken Getnick has taken over that role for Albany. Assembly member Phil Steck is scheduled to be here. He's actually scheduled to say something, and he's scheduled to give out some certificates to each of the students as well. So hopefully he will be here. I also was hoping to introduce Kirsten Gillibrand, our senator, who last year and I believe the year before and so on had provided some certificates. Is anybody here from her office to present certificates? Because I didn't receive them in the mail. Okay. Paul Tonko also has produced some certificates, which I have to hand out to each of the students. And I thank Paul Tonko. Danielle, where are you? There you are. Danielle Haft has been our intern for about 3 years, I think. Is it 3 years? And it's been great to work with Danielle, and you know, I don't know what I would do without Danielle, but welcome. I'm glad you're able to attend. She's here with her boyfriend, Ray, and so both of you welcome. Jim Lewis and Tom, what's your last name, Tom? Dvorak. Are our videography team and have been our videography team, I would say, probably for close to 30 years. These people have devoted themselves to this, and it's just been magnificent to work with them. We have a website, which, did I put it on there? Yeah, the website is there. The students know the website, the parents might not. Excuse me. We will start with presenting the essays and the awards associated with those in a moment, and I just want to let you know that there we have the list of people who are winners and the teachers who sponsored them. We hope that Phil Steck will be here. I've tried to confirm that, but just because I didn't get confirmation doesn't mean he won't be here. He probably will be. He just doesn't want to listen to me. And we have a whole list of people who are our sponsors. We appreciate and thank, and thank you. As Jim Lewis mentioned, this will be videotaped, and the DVDs coming from that videotape will go to the public access television, and each one of you will, each family will get one video, one DVD. Oh, gee. We have an invention of lawyers, but one of the things we rejected is fine print. It just gives us the right to use the images. There'll be a photograph, that's probably all, in the Jewish World newspaper. But at the bottom of this, there is a place to put your name and your address. And it's real important for you to do that because it's like a poorly hidden way of getting you to sign this thing. And that's where we'll mail the DVD. One of the things I wanted to point out is that young people often do things that are amazing. And the way I feel about it is there's nothing that can stop any of you from doing the things that you want and set your mind to do. You're smart, you're motivated. I know that because you're here. And there's nothing that you can't do, but you have to set your mind to doing it. And that's all I have to say about this, but you can make a difference. Just as teachers can make a difference, students can make a difference, and eventually they become more than students. This year's topic is one that was suggested by one of our judges a couple of years ago, and it's about Holocaust resistance and why some people did resist and others did not, and that has been the subject of our essays this year. And so I guess what we can do now is actually start with Josh. Gunther, where are you? You're here. Okay. Oh. You have your essay?
I do.
Okay. You know, if you didn't bring your essay, it won't help you a bit because I got them here too. Just make sure you're close to the mic, okay?
Okay. The Holocaust was a very dark and scary time in our world's history. In areas controlled by Nazis, thousands of Jews were killed every day because they were discriminated against because of their ethnicity. Many people were forced into hiding to escape the cruel reality they would face in concentration camps. In order to have a chance of survival, Jews relied on other people to provide shelter to keep them safe from Nazi control. People who helped Jews resisted government policy by hiding them and lying, even though they risked their lives to keep the Jews people safe. Some people were motivated by morals, and others may have been friends of the Jewish people they protected. Certain people took action, however. Lots of people didn't, as they were scared and afraid. Just as some people had motivations to help, Others had motivation to stay out of it. Some people figured they were scared and thought that they would just end up in trouble by trying to help the Jews or resisting Nazi authority. And any person resisted the Nazi control in any way, it normally led to them being imprisoned, beaten, or killed, just like other Jews. Many feared losing their lives from this, or even being separated from their family and things they loved. However, lots of people felt differently, and they needed to take a stand. Lots of uprisings would start among the underground resistors, where they would break out of their concentration camps and kill Germans who opposed them. In April of 1943, many revolts occurred as armed Jews began to form groups to attack German tanks. Many Jews took this response as they figured they were already facing death and didn't have much to lose. Even though these uprisings may have sent a message and done some harm, they were very harsh punishments for those caught revolting. Most of the time, German soldiers would just shoot them down or send them to the killing center where they would be gassed. Many people could also see how morally wrong it was, and they should stand up for themselves, but also others who were suffering, and many others who would die by the hand of the Nazi. Lots of people during this time would also send aid to the different Jews that were hiding as their way of contributing to the cause. During the Holocaust, millions of Jews were killed. Many showed courage and resisted in the revolts against the Germans, but others stayed quiet in fear of the consequences that faced them. The question of resistance during the Holocaust raises the issue of how each of us might respond in a different situation. If you were one of the Jews back then, would you have stayed quiet, or would you have stood up for what you believed in?
I have to give a whole sheaf of papers to Josh, and I just have a shot of the Boltanko's certificate. Michelle Neatfield is not here, right? Okay. So we have a check for Josh, and we have a check for his teacher, which I'll ask you to give to her because she was not sure she could make it today. This is the parent release form, and buried in here, there's also a pen, in case you don't want to write in blood. And here's the, there are 3 copies of the previous certificate. One is for your teacher, one is for your school, and one is for you. And so here's all this stuff. And I wish you good luck. And you're the father, right? Why don't you stand up and say hello? Thank you. And, very good, thank you. And I did forget to say that when we're done with the reading of the essays, well, Phil Steck should be here and have a few words to say. But after we're done with that, we will have a little group photograph with the students and the teachers. And if you'll put up with me, I'll be in it as well. And so we ask you not to leave until we've had that group photograph taken. And Gabriella, Gabby? You have it?
Yeah.
Okay. Stay close.
The ability to fight for justice and equality, even when faced with the possibility of punishment or death, is perhaps the highest form of bravery that exists. If one is able to face an institutionalized injustice and stand up against it, this person can help to pave the way towards a more accepting society. Many people throughout history have done this, regardless of what it might have cost them personally. These valorous people were really able to shape history and inspire others, and they existed throughout every single trying historical event, from the Civil War to the French Revolution to the Civil Rights Movement. Perhaps the most courageous of all of these people, however, are those who fought to resist the Holocaust during the Second World War. Such people displayed what may be considered as the highest amount of heroism that has ever been displayed in all of history. Resistance was incredibly difficult for Jewish people and for the citizens in all of the Nazi-occupied countries. The Nazis had such a harsh, controlling grip on society that citizens didn't have easy access to weapons or the ability to move about freely as they pleased. Despite how implausible it was for people to successfully resist, that did not stop people from trying. Resistance to the Holocaust appeared in several different forms, including spiritual resistance, armed uprisings, escaping, rescuing, and hiding Jews, and creating various partisan units. It existed in both loud and quiet ways, occurring both within the safety of one's home, even in one's own mind, and also occurring violently out in the streets or in one of the concentration camps. Hundreds of secret underground organizations were formed in the numerous concentration camps or ghettos, and they would periodically organize an armed uprising. Jewish people during the Holocaust often mentally resisted the belief system of the Nazis. Many of them would meet in secret to have religious gatherings and maintain their Jewish customs, or otherwise denounce the Nazi Party. Despite not being an active way of resisting, spiritual and cultural resistance played a massive role in bringing an end to the Nazi reign because they helped undermine the Nazi influence and they instilled hope in the hearts of the Jewish people. Any form of resistance to the Holocaust, no matter how minuscule it may have seemed, was able to make a huge difference and help to stop the Nazis much more rapidly. That being said, even the tiniest displays of resistance were a risk for someone to take. Underground resistors would be arrested or even killed without hesitation. Entire families and even entire communities were killed, since the Germans used a retaliation tactic in which they would hold groups of people responsible for the actions of one individual. By resisting against the Nazis, one was truly taking one's own life into his or her own hands. These resistors had to learn very quickly that they could no longer trust anyone, as even the person they perceived to be their best friend could believe in the Nazi sentiment and be ready to sell them out. Resistors needed to be constantly on their toes, watching out for a pitfall to their plan. The lives of anyone who resisted the Holocaust certainly were not easy. They were filled with fear and uncertainty and tests of loyalty. Despite how grueling and daunting the task of resisting could be, many people faced the prospect head-on. Resistors were motivated for a number of reasons. Perhaps a person wanted to save a friend or relative with a Jewish background, or perhaps said person was Jewish himself or herself. People did not want to see the world fall into chaos under the incredibly corrupt Nazi Party. All of the various reasons that people were motivated to resist, however, can boil down to one thing: humanity. Even the most ordinary of citizens were able to find it within themselves to help fight for what was right. An unthinkably horrific event was occurring in the other Nazi-occupied nations, with millions of innocent civilians being persecuted or murdered simply because of their religion or their race or their sexual orientation. The people who were aware of this and able to recognize the extent of it clearly must have felt at least somewhat compelled to do whatever they could to stop it. People resisted to the Holocaust and the Nazis because of their humanity. They recognized an injustice in the world, their moral principles told them it was wrong, and they felt the need to help bring an end to it. The fact is, all citizens of the Nazi-occupied countries could have sat idly and watched as the civilization around them collapsed, and as minority groups of people were mercilessly killed. But many did not. There is a lot to be said for those who resisted. They were resisting against an overwhelmingly powerful institution, ignoring all of the potential risks. These resistors brought hope to perhaps the darkest time in human history, and they continue to bring hope to humanity even today, decades after the Nazi reign has ended. While some people were compelled enough to resist, on the contrary, there are certainly also plenty of people who did not do anything to stop the Nazi reign. Many people refused to believe all that they'd heard, thinking it could not be possible for this much murder and horror to be occurring. Those who did believe it, or those who were experiencing it firsthand, were living in a constant state of fear. They likely feared the German army and Hitler, so they figured it would be safest for them to be compliant. These people were living in one of the most uncertain times in history, so they cannot be blamed for being too afraid to speak out or act against the Nazis.
Well, you should have brought your file cabinet. I've got all these things for you, including this for you to sign. Is Diane Guerin here? Oh, there you are, okay. This is the sponsoring teacher, and your parents can acknowledge or whatever. Don't spend it all in the same automobile dealership. Thank you. Lila? Okay, need this a little lower?
No, it's
Sure,
Many, many people resisted the Holocaust in different ways. The people who helped save the Jews or spoke out against Hitler faced death if their actions were discovered. They could have been put into concentration camps. Everything that they had could have been taken away. The people who did not speak out and took action knew what they were doing and put their lives or well-being in danger and probably were very scared but wanted to help those being targeted. There were two different types of resistors: people who used nonviolent or violent methods. The nonviolent resistors helped the Jews by keeping them in their homes or hiding them and speaking out against Hitler and the Nazis. For example, resistors developed underground newspapers and radio broadcasts. Miep Gies and her husband helped shelter the Frank family for over 2 years. Everyone who was a part of these types of efforts faced serious consequences if they were found out by the Nazis. The violent resistors would use explosives, assassinations, and sabotage, among other things. George Elser planted a bomb in an attempt to kill Adolf Hitler, but it was unsuccessful because Hitler left the location before the bomb could go off. Some of the social democratic politicians had a plan to assassinate Hitler and overthrow the Nazi Party, but the plan also did not work out. Resistance groups also formed to kill and sabotage Nazi soldiers. Of the people who did not speak out or take action, some were anti-Semitic and shared beliefs with the Nazi Party. Some were too afraid to take actions because of the consequences that threatened them if they were found out. Others just did not want to attract attention to themselves if they thought their nationality, religion, or sexual orientation was already targeted by the Nazi Party. If I were in this situation, I would resist the Nazis even if it would put myself at risk. Just because the government declares something or passes a law does not mean it is fair or just. Even now, there are laws and policies that are not fair or equal for everyone. It is important that everyone is treated with respect and equality in any circumstance.
Wait. Lila, thank you very much. You did a great job. I know this was not as easy for you as it could have been, but we tried. We have 3 copies of the certificate. Michael, 2 of them are for you, 1 to give to the school and 1 for your own use. There's actually a check in here for you as well. I didn't want to get too many packages here, so I'll leave it to Lila. And your parents, mother, and our Michael Jessup, the sponsoring teacher. Thank you very much. John? There you are, okay. You have a copy of your essay? You don't. Someone always tests. It's in there.
Thank you. Okay. My essay is called Truth That Prevails. The Nazis were a corrupt political party that used nationalism and anti-Semitism to narrow the minds of their followers and turn them into blind supporters. In order for someone to defy this manipulation, they had to turn themselves into free thinkers, developing a cultured cosmopolitan worldview. Those who did this saw the corruption of the Nazis, and some formed clandestine resistant groups such as the White Rose. However, the price of resistance was steep, as the Nazis had immense power and the ability to completely destroy lives. The personal accounts of those tattered, broken lives show the true dangers clandestine resistors faced when opposing the Nazis. Marinka Zaborylo, who lived in German-occupied Czechoslovakia, resisted the Nazis by hiding a Jewish man, Otto Wolf, and his family. If caught, Marinka's crime was punishable by death. One afternoon, her husband, Mr. Zorbilova, arrived home after church. He was riddled with anxiety and fear that his wife had decided to hide Jews in their home. Frustrated and paranoid by the fact that both his wife and he would be dead if the Nazis found out, he succumbed to his anger. Raging like a beast, he rips a newspaper out of her hand and bellows, "We, Otto and his family, had better be gone by morning." This scene was common among resistors who chose to harbor people in need. The immense anxiety and paranoia that comes with keeping a life or death secret can permeate into every part of one's life. The risks of hiding change the nature of even the most trusting relationships. The Zaborova family demonstrates that underground resistors who defied the Nazis risked losing their peace of mind. Another set of Nazi resistors was Adele and her mother. Adele's mother made the decision to send Adele, her daughter, with others to survive. I, Adele, remember how, with trembling hands, my mother buttoned my coat and pushed me out of the camp for my escape to Switzerland. In 1945, 3 years later, I was suspicious and mistrustful of the survivor of 3 concentration camps. I saw in her eyes the inexplicable mixture of sadness, fear, and love. "Are you my mother?" Although Adele was reunited with her mother, she was barely able to recognize her. What would have been warm memories of Adele's childhood was replaced with a dark hole of strenuous hardships, better forgotten than remembered. Adele's mother lost the chance to raise her own daughter, to see her grow up. She also had to risk never seeing her again. During the Holocaust, many mothers, like Adele's, were plagued with this decision. Often children went into hiding first because more people were willing to take a child than an adult. The story of Adele and her mother shows that the Nazis had the power to take your most beloved away from you. Underground resistance groups faced losing their family. Eva was a Jewish girl who belonged to a politically active family that resisted the Nazis. Because of this, she was deported to a death camp. On May 30, 1944, Eva, while sobbing, wrote, "Dear Diary, I don't want to die. I want to live. I would spend the end of the war in some cellar, or on the roof, or in some secret canny, only that they let me live. I can't write anymore, dear diary. The tears run from my eyes." Eva's simple request to live fell on deaf ears. She was murdered by the Nazis on October of 1944. Eva's short life demonstrates that the Nazis had the power to kill those who they chose. Anyone who stood against them faced death. The strife and hardship that tore apart the Zaborova family when they resisted the Nazis demonstrated that the Nazis had the power to destroy the core of an individual's psyche. The story of Adele and her mother showed the Nazis could break the unbreakable bond between mother and child. The story of Eva, an innocent teenage girl who begged her diary for the right to live, demonstrated the Nazis' power to take away life. Clandestine resistors who opposed the Nazis were risking their mental health, loved ones, and life itself. Despite these dangers, certain individuals made the decision to resist. Using a cosmopolitan viewpoint, they were able to perceive the Nazis for the corrupt organization they were. 2 resistors, Hans and Sophie Scholl, formed an organization called the White Rose that made and distributed 15,000 pamphlets throughout Germany, exposing the atrocities of the Nazi regime, such as the mass murder of Jews. However, when younger, Hans and Sophie weren't exempt from the Nazis' influence. They had attended the Hitler Youth League of German Girls and, like many German teenagers, had idolized Hitler. The children argued that Hitler had solved the problems of unemployment and pointed to the new motorways being built throughout the land. However, this idolatry turned into suspicion as Hans and Sophie noticed the ethnocentricity of the Nazis. He was annoyed when he was told that the Hitler Youth was not interested in his collection of international folk songs, international folk songs, especially Russian songs, were strictly forbidden. Frustrated at the narrow-mindedness of the Nazis, Han and Sophie focused on developing their worldviews by reading illegal books by worldwide philosophical writers: Socrates, Aristotle, St. Augustine, Pascal, Martin, and Bernanos. The influence of these thinkers went deep, strengthening their resolve against the regime. They also went on hitchhiking expeditions as far as Finland and Sweden. By developing this cosmopolitan worldview, they opened their minds past the dogmatic, militaristic view the Nazis worked so hard to create. They then were able to resist by distributing as many as 15,000 pamphlets to the public that revealed the true motives of the Nazi regime. Clandestine resistors like Hans and Sophie Skold defied the ethnocentricity of the Nazis by nurturing their cosmopolitan worldview. This gave them the resolve to face the numerous dangers of resistance, such as degradation of mental health, loss of family, and death. It also calls into question your own worldview. Would it give you the resolve necessary to look death in the eye and survive the bigoted onslaught of the corrupt? Would your truth prevail?
Thank you, John. Great. I know your teacher isn't here. Your father, your mother here?
They're over there.
Oh, okay, very good. We have all kinds of papers here. There's a check, parent release form, 3 copies of the certificate, and one from Paul Tonko.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. That's the Paul Tonko one. Holovi.
20 years after World War I, flaring from the still-lit flame of bitter German resentment, Hitler's regime, built on the appalling xenophobic idea of superiority of the Aryan race, ignited another war. World War II claimed the lives of 80 million people, an unspeakable suffering on a new scale. In an attempt to exterminate all Jews, this genocide, known as the Holocaust, resulted in the murder of 2/3 of the Jewish population in Europe. Nevertheless, the Nazis were not met without resistance. Questioning their moral authority and the essence of mankind, people faced a hard decision. Would they risk their lives to resist Hitler? Despite dangers, there were many brave enough to resist, while others did not.
I'm going to make this a little lower.
Thanks. One striking example of this resistance was the White Rose movement. Realizing the inhumane endeavors of the Nazis, Hans Scholl, his sister Sophie, and friend Christoph Probst started spreading a message of tolerance and nonviolence through a series of pamphlets called the White Rose. Starting from their college, the pamphlets soon circulated all around Germany and Austria. But after successfully operating in secret for 2 years, Hans, Sophie, and Christoph were caught and executed. Even though they were not Jews and were not directly affected, they stood up for what was wrong, sacrificing their lives. Another way that people retaliated was by hiding Jews. An example of this would be the rescue in Denmark. When doctors learned of the Nazis planning to arrest the Danish Jews, warning spread. Danes hid Jews wherever they could, in houses, barns, and shops. Their courage saved 7,000 Jews, who were smuggled safely to Sweden. Unfortunately, after a month of successful rescues, the Gestapo caught on. Patients, surgeons, and assistants were machine-gunned to death. Only a few lucky ones escaped unharmed. Lastly, another example of resistance was through the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. In the confined space of the ghetto, surrounded by barbed wires, the Jewish prisoners, pretending to be Nazis, lured a few officers into the ghetto and opened fire. The next few weeks were filled with constant fighting, bombing, and narrow escapes. The resistance fighters held them off for 3 weeks. Although the ghetto fell, it was after a heroic fight, and it hurt the prestige of the Nazis. The White Rose, the Denmark Rescue, and the Warsaw Uprising were only a few of the methods of resistance against the Nazis. The dangers were extreme, but motivations outweighed the risks. Some fought to avenge loved ones who died. Some stood up against what was morally unjust. Others fought for their own lives. The lives lost in World War II, and of those who resisted these abominable massacres, will remain a silent reminder of how hostility between men can break humanity, but can never erase who we are. Let us pay homage to their deaths, not by mourning, but by lowering our arms, ending our biggest problems in civil ways and embracing our differences. And that is the moral of their story in this living, breathing thing we call history.
Very nice. I think I can actually reach this. Michael is the sponsoring teacher, and your mother is here. We have something for you to sign here. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Can I spell your name?
No, it's spelled right.
Okay. Allison? This may be, yeah, that's okay.
In times of crisis, some people stand up for what they believe to be right, while others attempt to distance themselves from the horrors around them.
It's just a little closer to you, okay.
Those who choose denial try to place blame on those around them, accusing them of being the cause of everything wrong with the world. Those who spoke out against the horrors and atrocities committed during the Holocaust did so in many ways, with varying degrees of success, but always at great risk to themselves and everyone around them. The largest example of Holocaust resistance occurred in Denmark. Many Danes resisted the Holocaust by simply refusing to turn in their Jewish neighbors to the Nazis. Others warned their neighbors who were Jewish, helped them to go into hiding, or saved money to pay for Jewish people to travel to Sweden, away from the anti-Semitic Nazi regime. The efforts of Danish resistors were only as successful as they were because the majority of the population assisted in some way. The occupying power could not fight an entire population or force people to turn in Jews they were actively trying to protect. In other areas of Nazi-occupied Europe, people did not always try to help their Jewish neighbors, and many did not resist. It was common in the early years of the war to not believe the atrocious conditions Jews were subjected to. The Nazis did not make the existence of the death camps known, so the vast majority of Europeans and Americans believed that Jews were simply being deported or sent to labor camps. Never in history had there been an attempt to systematically decimate an entire population that was as brutal, organized, and efficient as that of the Nazis. There was no precedent for what the Nazis did, and most who were told about it would not believe it. Their minds simply refused to accept the reality of the genocide occurring around them, so they did nothing. Propaganda and fear of Hitler should not be underestimated. Jews were portrayed everywhere as being subhuman. Young children were taught that Jews were a drain on Germany's resources and were responsible for everything wrong with the world. Nazi propaganda depicted Jews as the cause of Germany's humiliating defeat at the end of World War I, the hardships inflicted upon the German people from hyperinflation, and the worldwide Great Depression during the interwar years. The German people, already half-starved, humiliated in the Great War, and looking for a simple answer to their problems, accepted Hitler's ideas about their own superiority and others' racial inferiority, and did not oppose his plans to exterminate those deemed by the Nazi regime to be inferior. The international community did little to stop this at the time, but subsequently determined the actions taken by Nazi forces to be war crimes. A reason for the limited effectiveness of opposition from Jews is that the Nazis segregated Jewish people into ghettos and took all weapons from them. This made organized resistance nearly impossible. Unarmed, isolated in crowded and unsanitary conditions, and barely able to feed themselves, Jews had little ability to defend themselves. Despite this, some did resist. Any opposition and all resistance to the Nazi regime was met with ruthless force. Resistors were rarely able to escape and were tortured, sent to concentration camps, or killed outright. Attempts to resist often resulted in the deaths of every person associated with the resistors. For this reason, many in occupied Europe were unwilling to help Jews or turned them into the SS because of fear for their own safety and belief about the propaganda about the Aryan race's supposed superiority. Some people were able to successfully distance themselves from reality around them. Others did not speak out because they believed themselves safe from the horrors of the Nazi regime. A survivor of the Nazi concentration camps, Martin Niemöller, described the dangers of not speaking out as, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." He eventually did what only a small minority of people did. He spoke out against the discrimination and genocide inflicted by Hitler. People did not want to believe the horrors of the genocide, and no civilized society could accept the magnitude of the Holocaust. Those looking to depend on a leader to take them through difficult times allowed themselves to be blinded to reality and compassion, and refused to resist Nazism. What separates Niemöller and all resistors from those who watched in silence was their trust in their own beliefs, their own internal moral compasses, and the refusal to blindly follow a ruthless dictator.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much. Don't go away. Your teacher is here, and there you are. And your parents are there as well, right? Where are your parents? I can't remember where you are. Oh, there you are. Okay. You gotta take all that. We got 3 copies of the certificate, 1 for your teacher, 1 for your school, 1 for you. And this certificate is yours. Okay. Well, our program is a little shorter than anticipated, but that's okay. I don't have to speak as much then. Before we leave, I'd like to get the winning students up say, over here, and my wife Eileen has volunteered to take a photograph. And there's some refreshments in the back. And other than that, I would like to get those signed parent release forms. Other than that, I thank you, and you're almost dismissed. If we could come over here. While we are getting those parent release forms, let me just say I'm seeing my kayaking buddy Larry Rautenberg, Dr. Rautenberg, and it's reminding me that we have another kayaking buddy whose name is Monica Wall, whose father received a silver medal from the King of Denmark for the rescue of Jews during World War II, and she spoke about her experiences as a Swedish citizen, very, very young, at the age of just a few years, in Gothenburg in Sweden. And her father was had a fishing boat, and he would go out into the Kattegat and meet with the Danish boats, and they would exchange cargoes. The Jewish cargo would go to the Swedish boat, and they would come back, and that was a heroic involvement with these. I think two of our students have mentioned this event.
I give him everything I want. Over time and over. We'll do this close together.
It's been a while, yeah.
Are the teachers here also? Any of the teachers? Please come forward.
Can I help with this? Would you two come down here a little bit closer to make it makes a better picture? I'll both right here. That's good. Sorry. Be in front of, and then move down. So taller ones in the back and shorter ones in the front. Make them all. Okay. Fire away.
1, 2, smile. Congratulations.
Have you taken yours?
Nice looking group.
All right, this way and smile. One more. Thank you.
Congratulations.
I just sent you the picture.
Congratulations. Cookie time.